It's finally here. Soberoni of G&A Reviews here with another Servant Spotlight, this time for Medusa's Mega Evolution, Gorgon. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively, and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 4-star servants. Now, onto Gorgon's stats. Gorgon has a max HP of 10,197, exceedingly low for a 4-star servant. However, her max attack of 10,706 is currently the highest attack stat of all 4-star servants, and because of her 1.1 times class modifier, her effective attack is much higher at 11,776, surpassing even many 5-star servants. As for how she compares to the rest of her class, there's only one other 4-star Avenger to compare her to, and she beats him out in both HP and attack. Taking a look at her skills, Gorgon's first skill is Monstrous Strength rank A+. It increases her attack for one turn between 30 and 50% depending on level. Her second skill is Demonic Mutation rank B. It applies Guts one time for 5 turns, reviving her between 1000 and 3000 HP, and it also increases her crit strength for 3 turns between 20 and 50%, both depending on level. And finally, her last skill is Mystic Eyes rank A++. It gives her between a 55 and 105% chance to stun an enemy for 1 turn, depending on level. Taking a look at her passives, she has Avenger rank B, which increases her NP gain when receiving damage by 18%, and decreases the debuff resist of all allies except herself by 8%. She also has Oblivion Correction rank C, which increases her crit strength by 6%, and Self-Restoration Magical Energy rank A, which increases her NP gauge by 3.8% per turn. Moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Gorgon has an Arts Buster deck with Quick, Arts, Buster, Buster, and a Buster Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm, Pandemonium Cetus, deals heavy damage to all enemies, with between a 300 and 500% damage modifier depending on level. It'll also inflict Curse for 5 turns on all enemies, damaging them between 1000 and 3000 per turn depending on overcharge, and it'll also increase the NP gauge of all allies by 10%. This Noble Phantasm can be strengthened through an Interlude, which will increase the damage modifier to between 400 and 600% depending on level, and will also increase the NP gauge effect to 15%. Taking a closer look at her cards, we see that her Quick card hits 3 times, her Arts hits 5 times, her Buster hits 3 times, and her Extra attack hits 5 times. She has an NP gain rate of 0.37% and a star rate of 6%. This translates into good NP gain due to the 5-hit Arts and Extra, but bad star generating due to only one Quick card. Gorgon is a servant of extremes. She has extremely low HP, comparable to a 3-star, yet she has ridiculous attack that stands up to even some 5-star servants. This stark gap in her stats is very reminiscent of another certain Buster Avenger, but that's where the comparisons between Jolter and Gorgon end. Rather than Jolter, she actually has far more in common with her Rider and Lancer variants, both the good and the bad. Starting with her skill set. Just like her predecessors, she possesses Monstrous Strength. This time, it's rank A+, making it significantly stronger. Gorgon's Monstrous Strength is a full 50% attack buff, making it very similar to Mana Burst, except that as an attack buff, it'll increase the damage on all of your cards. So it's a very reliable and powerful skill that can seriously buff your Noble Phantasm damage. Gorgon also packs Mystic Eyes as a skill, same as Rider Medusa, and it isn't any less effective. In fact, it has an extra 5% chance of hitting compared to Rider Medusa. A 105% chance stun is significant, and it's a great piece of utility for the team that Gorgon offers. And finally, Gorgon's last skill, Demonic Mutation, grants a full-on Guts effect and a very strong 3-turn crit buff. Again, this skill is similar to Medusa Lancer's Guts, but arguably much better. It doesn't grant invincibility, but it does last for 5 turns instead of 3, and it has a crit damage focus, making it overall a much more reliable offensive and defensive tool. For skill priority, go with Monstrous Strength first, as it's your strongest attack buff, followed by Mystic Eyes as the stun chance increases significantly with levels, and then finally your Guts, as that skill does pose some problems which we'll get into later. Gorgon's passives are also good, giving her even more crit damage and Noble Phantasm gain, making her even more of an offensive threat. Gorgon's Noble Phantasm is an AoE buster that also curses enemies and charges the Noble Phantasm gauge of all your allies. The curse damage is mostly irrelevant, so overcharge doesn't matter, but being able to give your whole party a small Noble Phantasm charge is some nice utility. 10% or 15% after the interlude may not seem like much, but considering you're getting it for free attached to a very powerful offensive Noble Phantasm, and the fact that Gorgon's Noble Phantasm isn't hard at all to get off thanks to her good NP gain, the NP charge can make a difference, and it always helps. Gorgon's strength comes from her very high damage, obviously, but also from her stun and party NP charge, so don't overlook those. Because of her AoE Noble Phantasm, Gorgon is better used for farming mobs, so she does play a lot like a 4-star version of Rider Medusa with some beefed up stats and beefed up skills, but a similar role on the team. Where Gorgon differs from her Medusa counterparts, however, is her reliance on crit stars, and here's where we run into one of several major issues. As you can tell from Gorgon's skills and her passive, she benefits tremendously from crits. This is how she can maximize her damage. But as an Avenger, her star weight is abysmal, so she's a crit servant that crit stars will actively avoid. And you may not think it's a big deal because she does have incredibly high attacks, so maybe she doesn't need crits to do a lot of damage, but despite her incredible attack stat, she lacks class advantage over anything besides rulers, which are exceedingly rare. So her actual neutral damage is abysmal, and almost any servant with class advantage is going to outdamage her. It doesn't help that she lacks a charisma or any kind of attack buff with good uptime. While monstrous strength is great for her Noble Phantasm damage, it does nothing for her when it's not active, which is going to be 80% of the time. Speaking of which, to further compound an issue of low damage, her Noble Phantasm is AoE, which makes it naturally a lot weaker than a single target Noble Phantasm. To go back to the Jolter comparison earlier, the reason Jolter works as a high damage unit despite the lack of class advantage is because she has a cocktail of ridiculously low cooldown powerful attack buffs, a crit buff with star weight to ensure that she can get crit stars, and a single target Noble Phantasm, all the things that Gorgon lacks. And Gorgon also shares the critical flaw of the other Medusa servants as well, very long cooldowns with very little uptime, meaning most of the time your skills are not active and are on cooldown. Both of these issues require tremendous reliance on a good team to resolve. To function to the best of her potential, Gorgon needs teammates that can either grant her low cooldown attack buffs or crit stars to make up for her lack of damage. Liz and Nero Bride are great support buffers for Gorgon. Both provide low cooldown attack buffs, so you can ensure your damage is much more consistent and much higher. Liz gives Gorgon a huge 40% charisma buff, and combined with her torture technique, Gorgon is going to be hitting enemies for 60% more damage. Nero Bride can also provide the same quality of damage buffs between her second skill and the defense down in her Noble Phantasm, but she also provides a great NP gain buff to help Gorgon get off multiple Noble Phantasms in a fight. If you'd rather rely on crit stars, then I suggest going with either Shuten, and I do mean Shuten this time, not Steno, or Nightingale. Shuten is just a good star generator that also provides quality damage buffs and complements Gorgon's utility with a charm of her own. And Nightingale with a good star generating craft essence like 2030 can make for a good crit star support because she has lower star weight than Gorgon. So while she won't produce stars at the same rate as Jack or Fuma, she does have the benefit of not competing as hard for Gorgon's crit stars. And she also packs a gigantic buster buff that's going to improve your damage considerably. Gorgon's Bondcraft Essence is Suresour. It boosts the Buster Card effectiveness and Noble Phantasm gain of all allies by 10%. I wouldn't recommend using this over more traditional craft essences because it doesn't really help out Gorgon's weaknesses. First and foremost, if you're going to try and use her effectively in crit teams, you're going to need a craft essence that improves your star gather rate considerably. Something like Seal Designation Enforcer, Room Guard, Teacher and I, or Leisurely Stroll. If you aren't going for crit damage, then traditional buster buffing craft essences are going to work fine. Stuff like Limited Zero, Golden Sumo, Ellie Chan's Quest, or anything similar. Finally, for some future proofing, Beyond the Wish and Talk of the Hot Sands are tremendously strong on Gorgon, depending on whether you would rather go for buster buffing damage or your crit damage, respectively. Overall, Gorgon feels like a luxurious supercar that doesn't have any wheels. She has the framework of a great servant with her off-the-charts attack, good skill set, and decent utility. But her long cooldowns and over-reliance on crit stars mean she isn't going anywhere without the whole team breaking their backs to push her. So she gets a B- from me. Her damage is severely nerfed by her class, her lack of star weight, and her AoE Noble Phantasm, but she still manages to be a good farmer for small mobs and daily quests, which makes her useful, and if you can get a good team behind her, she can really take off and do some incredible things. And those are my thoughts on Gorgon. She's below average, but really not bad if you can support her properly. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.